What if the seeds you plant today were designed to grow, but never grow again? And what if the food system you trust depends on that happening? For thousands of years, growing food followed a simple cycle. You plant, you harvest, you save seeds, and you plant again. It was a natural rhythm, one that gave people independence, control, and a direct connection to the land. But something changed. Today, many people still plant seeds, but very few ask a simple question: can these seeds be used again? Because in modern agriculture, not all seeds are created equal. Some are designed to produce food once, and then stop. No second chance, no continuation. And most people have no idea. In this video, you're going to understand what's really happening behind modern seeds, how this system works, and why it matters even if you only grow a small garden at home. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment, have you ever tried to replant seeds from something you bought? Because what you're about to learn might completely change the way you see something as simple as planting. Now let's go back to a time when seeds didn't come with limits, and every harvest carried the future inside it. For most of human history, seeds were more than just the beginning of a plant. They were continuity. When someone planted a crop, they weren't just thinking about that season. They were thinking about the next one, and the next, and the next. Every harvest carried within it the possibility of future harvests. Not because of technology, but because of how nature works. You grow food, you collect seeds, you plant again. Simple, reliable, independent. Families, communities, and entire societies depended on this cycle. Seeds were saved, exchanged, adapted to local conditions. Over time, they became stronger, more resilient, more suited to the environment they were grown in. And something important happened because of that. People didn't just grow food, they owned the process. If you had seeds, you had control. You didn't need to go back and buy them again. You didn't need permission. You didn't depend on a system to keep your garden alive. The knowledge was passed down quietly. Which seeds to keep, when to harvest them, how to store them. It wasn't complicated. It was practical, and it worked. But then agriculture started to change. As populations grew and demand increased, the focus began to shift. It wasn't just about growing food anymore. It became about growing more food, faster, and in a more predictable way. At first, this seemed like progress: better yields, larger harvests, more consistency. But there was a hidden trade-off. To achieve that level of control, something had to be simplified, standardized, adjusted to fit large-scale systems. And seeds began to change with it. Instead of being selected naturally over time, they started being developed in controlled environments. Instead of adapting to the land, they were designed to perform under specific conditions. On the surface, this didn't seem like a problem. Plants still grew. Food was still produced. But underneath, something subtle was happening. The relationship between people and seeds was slowly shifting. Instead of saving seeds from one harvest to the next, more and more farmers began relying on new seeds each season, not because they wanted to, but because the seeds they were using no longer behaved the same way. Some didn't produce the same results when replanted. Others lost their strength. Some simply didn't grow as expected. And over time, a new habit formed. Instead of saving seeds, people started buying them again. At first, it felt like a convenience. Why go through the effort of saving seeds when you could just get new ones that were already optimized? But convenience has a way of becoming dependence, and once that shift happens, it's hard to go back, because the moment you stop saving seeds, you stop controlling the cycle, and that raises a question that most people never stop to ask. What if this wasn't just a side effect of modern agriculture? What if it was intentional? What if some seeds were actually designed to break that cycle? That's exactly what we're about to uncover. Now it's time to reveal what's really behind this shift. There is a concept often called Terminator Seeds. At first, the name sounds extreme, almost like something from a movie. But the idea behind it is surprisingly simple. These are seeds designed to grow normally in the first season, but not produce viable seeds for the next one. In other words, you can plant them once, you can harvest the crop, but if you try to take seeds from that harvest and plant again, nothing happens. The cycle stops. To understand this, think of a plant as a kind of living loop. Normally, that loop continues naturally. The plant grows, produces seeds, and those seeds carry the same ability to grow again. That's how life sustains itself. But with this type of seed, that loop is interrupted. The plant still grows, it still looks healthy, it still produces food, but the seeds it creates are like copies that can't continue the process. It's like a book that ends without a sequel. Now here's where things get important. Why would something like this exist? From a purely practical perspective, it creates control. If seeds cannot be reused, they must be replaced. And if they must be replaced, the person growing the food has to return to the source every single season. It turns a natural cycle into a repeated transaction. Instead of saving seeds from your harvest, you now depend on getting new ones again and again. And that changes the entire dynamic, because the moment seeds stop being reusable, they stop being something you truly own. You can grow them, you can harvest them, but you can't continue them. And for large-scale systems, that creates predictability. Every season starts fresh, every crop follows the same pattern. Everything becomes easier to manage at scale. But for individuals, especially those trying to grow their own food, the impact is very different. It means less independence, less control over your own supply, less ability to adapt. Now, it's important to understand something clearly. Not every seed used today works this way. Many seeds can still be saved and replanted. But the existence of this concept reveals something deeper about the direction modern agriculture has taken. It shows a shift away from self-sustaining systems toward controlled ones, and once you see that shift, it becomes hard to ignore. Because it's not just about one type of seed, it's about a mindset, a way of designing systems where continuation is no longer natural, but conditional. And that leads to a bigger question. If the cycle of seeds can be controlled, what else can be? And more importantly, what does that mean for the future of growing your own food? That's what we need to look at next. Once you understand how this kind of seed changes the cycle, something else becomes clear. The real issue isn't just the seed itself, it's what happens when the entire system begins to depend on it. Because when seeds can no longer be saved, the relationship between people and food starts to shift in a quiet but powerful way. Growing food stops being a self-sustaining process and becomes something that needs to be restarted from the outside every single time. And that changes more than just agriculture. It changes behavior. Think about it in simple terms. In the past, if you had a small garden, you could keep it going indefinitely. One good harvest could lead to the next. You learned which plants worked best in your soil, which seeds were strongest, which ones adapted over time. Your garden became smarter with you. It evolved. But when seeds don't continue, that evolution stops. Every season becomes a reset. You're no longer building on what worked before. You're starting over again and again, using something that was designed somewhere else under different conditions for a different purpose. And slowly, without realizing it, you lose something important. Your ability to adapt, your connection to the process, your independence. Now multiply that by thousands, millions, entire regions. What you get is a system where fewer and fewer people are actually in control of how food is grown. Not because they don't want to be, but because the tools they rely on don't allow it. And here's where it gets even more subtle. When something becomes the standard, people stop questioning it. If buying new seeds every season becomes normal, it doesn't feel like a limitation anymore. It feels like the way things are supposed to be. But it wasn't always like that. And it doesn't have to be. Because even today, there are alternatives. There are seeds that can still be saved, plants that still follow the natural cycle, methods that allow you to keep growing without constantly restarting from zero. They exist, but they require a different mindset, one that values continuity over convenience, one that sees seeds not as products, but as something alive, something that carries the future inside it. And this is where the real choice appears, not a dramatic one. Not something that happens overnight, but a quiet decision. Do you follow a system that resets every season, or one that grows with you over time? Because in the end, this isn't just about agriculture. It's about how much control you're willing to keep over something as basic as your own food. A seed may look small, simple, almost insignificant, but inside it, there's a cycle, a beginning, a continuation, and a future. For most of history, that cycle belonged to the people who planted it. It was something you could hold in your hand, something you could pass forward, something you could rely on. But today, that cycle is not always guaranteed. And maybe that's the real point of this story. Not to create fear, not to reject progress, but to understand what has changed. Because once you see that some systems are designed to continue, and others are designed to reset, you start to look at things differently. And maybe the most important question isn't what kind of seed you plant, but what kind of system you're planting yourself into. If this made you think in a new way, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest consequences.